I'm Charlotte Beyer. I'm the founder of the Institute for Private Investors, or IPI, a group, a company that offered no advice, sold no products, that I founded almost 25 years ago after 20 years on Wall Street. And the membership of IPI today includes 1,200 private investors, all of whom have a minimum of 30 million, but a third of them have over 300 million. And that group comes from 40 US states and 18 countries around the world. And I went off on my own on this entrepreneurial venture called IPI because I wanted to transform the way the investor and the advisor work together. I thought I saw a better way, and it would come from education and community and the safety of a confidential place to share information and learn from each other. I sold my company almost 4 years ago, and of course, I realized when a Wharton professor said to me after I was teaching a class called Wealth Management Unwrapped, he said, "You ought to write this down in a book." So I have now. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done. And Wealth Management Unwrapped is really a roadmap for what I call the CEO of My Wealth Incorporated. And that CEO has been newly appointed, like it or not, and needs to know what they need to know to properly oversee that wealth. Most investors do not feel passionate about investing, but what they do feel passionate about is doing a better job of overseeing and preserving and growing their wealth. And that's where the advisory community comes in. And so I believe it's a partnership, and my book is really dedicated to the investors I watched who did it really, really well, found advisors they were thrilled with, and launched into a journey of self-discovery and wealth preservation and growth that gave them great satisfaction, so they could go on to do things they really wanted to do, and not just be buried in the investment jargon and technical. They didn't want that. So that's my book, and I hope that the investors it's addressed to benefit immensely. It's just as applicable to an investor with $1 million as it is to an investor with $1 billion. Both have the same issues.
Welcome to Conversations with Leaders in Luxury. I'm Greg Furman, founder and chairman of the Luxury Marketing Council. Since 1994, 1,000 luxury brands, now in some 53 cities worldwide, and about 5,000, 6,000 CEOs and CMOs as members. Thank you for joining us, for the investment of your time and the luxury of your company today. I'm with Charlotte Beyer, a long-standing friend who preceded me by about a year in a similar industry group. In Charlotte's cases, coming from a private asset management background, high-end investment. In my case, the whole portfolio of luxury brands. Charlotte, it's always a treat to be with you, and I'm so glad for our connection, and thank you.
It's been a long time. It's I think it's over 20
years.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
This time does fly. Mm-hmm. So tell us a little bit about you and what took you to found the Institute for Private Investors more than 21 years ago, right?
It's even more than that.
Is it? Wow.
Yeah. So, well, I spent a long time on Wall Street, and I was in marketing and sales, working for asset management firms like Lazard, DLJ,
Lazard Fair, right?
Yep, Donaldson, Lufkin, and Jenrette. And I saw that the model of selling was just a little broken.
Yeah.
And I wanted to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
So I went out and created a company that did not offer advice and sold no product, which was sort of weird.
Right.
A lot of people told me it was a little weird.
Right.
But what it was my vision was to create a community of investors who could learn from each other, but also learn from really smart advisors. Mm-hmm. And thereby become better overseers of substantial wealth. Now, the membership was people who had at least 30 million or more to worry about and oversee. And that company...
Net worth or investable?
Investable.
Investable. After the horses, the yachts, the cars, the houses.
Absolutely, yeah. Investable assets. And I've often used the expression that when you have that kind of wealth, whether you've sold a company or you've inherited it, you have been appointed, like it or not, the CEO of My Wealth, Inc.
Yeah.
a job for which you've not had a lot of training, and it is quite a challenge.
You were very early on in that continuum. I mean, one of the things that inspired me to create the council was what I respectfully say was the arrogance in some ways of luxury brands, meaning we build it, therefore they will come. We only have to do a massive amount of advertising, and that constitutes marketing. And I know, having run marketing at the NYSE, that the financial services world was very closed, if I may, old boy network. And there was a lot of entrepreneurialism rumbling from, I wouldn't say renegades, but visionaries that broke away, like yourself. But if I may, having three sisters, one, it was unusual for a woman to take that step, maybe more difficult. And two, in the continuum, you were very early on.
Well, I have two wonderful stories that prove your point perfectly. First of all, naively, in December of '91, I sent out 1,500 invitations. I thought perfectly crafted, and I didn't get a single bite. And they were sent to people who had the wherewithal and I thought would have the motivation to attend.
And I'm sure, knowing you, they were beautifully designed and so on.
Enclosed in envelopes by my daughter and her best friend on our dining room table.
Right.
And I was terrified.
And this was announcing the concept of the Institute for Private Investors.
It was announcing the event in May of '92, which was held at the St. Regis when it was just barely renovated back in '92.
Sure.
And then the second story, which is equally important, is then I called up my best friend and I said, it's not working. I've left the wonderful world of corporate asset management and nobody wants to come to the first event. And she said, Charlotte, you've got to pick up the phone. You've got to do the personal outreach. And she was so right, and then slowly but surely, and I had a little whiteboard showing, how many people were coming, and everyone else wanted to know, well, who else is coming?
Right.
And I said, well, we can't tell you, because this is a private group getting together of ultra high net worth investors. The piece, though, that I didn't realize how critical it was, I had to also include the advisors. Because if you put a group of investors in the room all by themselves, you need some stimulation. You need some interesting thought leaders that also can toss their ideas in. And so at that very first event in '92, we had 34 professionals from representing, the firms that you might imagine. And that, additionally with 100 some odd investors, was the perfect mix.
And was it a social event initially with some content, or?
It was all content. And as you so aptly put, content is the glue, but in the case of the Institute for Private Investors, or IPI as we've come to know it, in the case of IPI, the glue is really the community.
Right.
People come back for the 4 events a year that are held in San Francisco and New York that are the big ones, 2 days each. And then there are another 35 or 40 that are small.
Smaller, boutique-y, bespoke events, regional,
But the reason they come back is the only way they're going to see their friends from Topeka, Kansas, and Chicago, and Dallas, and New York, and Saudi Arabia is when they come to an IPI forum.
Right. So I think I know the brilliance of your concept, proven by history, and your acquisition, your being acquired. One was the right community and the insight into high touch personal, and the power of extending the community by word of mouth on the richest family side of the equation. And I think as, or maybe even more so, providing a neutral perspective by assembling the advisors in every equities, futures, real estate, wealth transference, all of the areas that your content programming touches on, and marrying the two. That, to me, from the very beginning, was brilliant, and you made an entire career after leaving the corporate world. And try not to smile too much about that.
Well, I was very blessed because with the, as you so aptly put it, you need to have a personal outreach. So I knew every single member, advisor or investor, and then over the 20 plus years I came to know their children, their grandchildren, and then they'd bring them to the forum. And I guess the other glue was an online community. Before Google, before Facebook, in 1997 we launched a very ugly but utilitarian online community. So investors could say, well, what do you think about this new fund coming out from XYZ firm? Or what about protector trusts? Or how do I find an advisor? Or how do I find a family facilitator for our family retreat? And those were really important pieces. The online community, so often people say, oh, well, the ultra wealthy are not online. Oh,
quite the
they
contrary.
are. Virtually every family of the 350 plus families, members of IPI, have at least one member of the family online, even though 2/3 of them don't ever raise their head and ask or answer a question, but they sure do read.
Well, and all the research by the Harrison Group and McKinsey and Bain and American Express Publishing show that in addition to the millennials, the earliest adapters are the most apt to new technology and the most open to use of new technology. And maybe even especially as pertains to investment in financial services, are the super rich.
In fact, 70% of the people who attend events at IPI are signing up online.
Wow.
70%. And they like it. And they get it on their mobile. They get the agenda on their mobile device. They can sign up. They can change their sign-ups. All of it is
It's astonishing,
online.
isn't it? I mean, Chris Olchen, who is my CMO and created the Young Luxury Marketers Council, we're finding that a large portion of our members come to us via our website. And the thing that astonishes me, and Chris is a great salesperson, that many of the sales, if not most, are closed after one experience of the council and then on the phone. And I'm sure you've seen similar trends.
People do research, and they do it online. Absolutely.
So what was the monetization model? So you have two streams of revenue, well, at least. So on the family side, they would pay an annual membership?
Well, the beauty of the model and what allowed us to be so profitable and successful over those 20 plus years was this. Everyone paid to attend an event.
Okay.
And everyone paid through becoming a member. So we bundled the attendance into the membership fee for the family. So a family could buy a family membership, which allowed them to send anyone and take 2 spots or whatever. And then the advisors also could join at different levels. They
Based
could,
on the gross revenue of the company or number of people?
How active and how involved they wanted to be.
Okay.
So if they really wanted to be in the room, fly on the wall, watching the families interact and learn, or one fee. But if they were just going to be,
present among a number of thoroughbreds.
Watching online or listening online, because the website memberlink.net is very active. Lots of advisors posting updates, posting thought leader papers, and so on, as is the family. The family's online reading it and talking to each other in a private, I call it gated community.
Right. And I know you've done, I remember, well, this is going to be a long time ago, but you did a major tour with some 60 people to the Taj Mahal in India and took them inside with the royal family. So an aspect of it is also social, not for your community of investors.
Well, Greg, we like to do business with people we like. And so the idea was these investors are doing due diligence so they know how to invest their monies. And the world was becoming global. So in 1997, we took a group of 60 investors to Hong Kong and Vietnam and Beijing. And we were in the Diute State Compound in Beijing with a wonderful state dinner. And then we had 7 additional trips that we took to the Middle East, to Argentina, to the UK. Now there's an exotic place, and Russia, and and back to China again in 2004. Those trips where we were treated beautifully, and there were a lot of connections made. But that really was the spirit of learning about investments in a pretty comfortable way, because you're immersing yourself in a culture and you're learning, okay, here are some of the stumbling places that I might trip up on when I'm looking at investing in India, for instance. We had a private tour of the pyramids in Egypt that was unforgettable at sunrise. So we all had to get up at 3:30 in the morning.
So, I mean, that is a key, and I think there have been other family offices that have followed suit of various dimensions. And then relatively recently, you were acquired, which has given you some liberty to do some other things.
Yeah.
Did you want to talk about that a little bit, or just to set the stage for what it is now?
Well, I have a personal view
Okay.
that the secret to life is knowing when it's enough.
Right.
And I came to realize almost 4 years ago that I couldn't grow globally, IPI, all by myself,
Right.
and that I needed a global partner. And Camden Wealth and Camden Media were perfect.
And it's CAMPDEN.
And based in London, Hong Kong, New York, and maybe even Singapore.
And for people that don't know Camden Wealth, they are a fairly impressive large organization, and their holdings include...
Well, they have Family Business, the magazine. They have an entire Next Gen program. Yep, they publish a magazine several times a year called Family Business. Also Family Office for the Family Office executive. And their programs are all around the world in some hot spots a few years ago that they can't go back to, such as Damascus or Beirut. But they have business-owning families who speak in a roundtable format, and their conferences are very impressive. And they have also conferences in Miami for the entire Latin American contingent.
I think David Berger, who is coming to a luncheon that we're doing today with Edie Weiner. So through your introduction, I'm looking forward to meeting him. So once that had transpired, I remember you talking about a book years ago, and kind of one of those things that I somehow suspected would happen. And now, within the last 4 years, Wealth Management Unwrapped is about to be born.
I never thought I'd write a book.
Gestation phase.
But where it really came from was I had been teaching at Wharton a 5-day residential curriculum called Private Wealth Management, which I created with them and the professors, the amazing professors there, since 1999. The first class had 20 private investors, and the professors had no idea who these people were, except when they heard that they were founders of New York Stock Exchange companies that they knew, they said, oh, okay.
Light bulb went off.
Right, and these professors, at least 4 of them, are still teaching it. It's twice a year, held at both their Philadelphia and San Francisco campus. Still teaching it now in 2014. They found it a fascinating group, because these were men and women who were families that had created extraordinary wealth. I believe 38 countries now have been represented and almost 800 people.
Wow.
That was the inspiration.
Is it a semester a year that you're doing?
It's 5 days, residential program, and I do it twice a year.
Great.
But that, along with IPI, inspired me to write this book. I thought, I have some unfinished business. And the unfinished business is I've been teaching, doing formats, creating the environment for these investors to oversee their own wealth, become successful CEOs of My Wealth Inc. And what I haven't done is recorded what I've seen and what I've observed about these investors and what makes some of them suddenly be stress-free and enjoy the overseeing of their wealth, and what makes the others get nervous and upset.
Did you do it through, your own knowledge of best practices over the years and also interviews? What was your process?
It was osmosis. Watching investors learn at Wharton and at IPI, I realized that the successful ones were taking almost identical steps towards being successful overseers.
So your osmosis, in the sense that all of your absorption of the content and rubbing elbows with the people that were more or less or more successful, was the real heart of it.
The heart of my book, Wealth Management Unwrapped, is what have I observed that works and what have I observed that doesn't work? And how can an investor who is not passionate about investing but is passionate about preserving and growing their wealth, how can they handle this? How can they be a good CEO? It's the equivalent of, why would a CEO ever say, I'm going to figure out the telecommunications system we should have at our company. I'm going to go do all the wiring. I'm going to go down and make all the connections and decide.
A lot of it is,
they don't want that.
It's often said that the smartest CEOs hire people that are smarter than themselves.
Exactly.
So a lot of it is finding a trusted advisor and an advisor through recommendation where the chemistry is right, but also has the chops to take the burden of having to micromanage it off the individual doing the hiring.
Absolutely, absolutely. But so many investors try to short circuit, and they forget that being a CEO means you've got to think a little bit, maybe do a little homework. But it's homework they already know by heart.
Right. When you say CEO, you mean CEO of one's own portfolio.
My Wealth Incorporated.
Yeah, there you go.
Now, what's so interesting to me is that these investors don't believe that investing is easy, as most of the books out there tell them.
Right.
And I don't either.
Yeah.
So what I think is investing is not easy. It's like my son saying, why can't you work the remotes, the 3 remotes in your living room, Mom? Well, I can't, and I never will, and I won't read the instruction manual either, because it makes no sense.
And you don't want to.
Yeah, that's why most private investors who came to IPI, to all the events we held over those 20 years, they loved learning, but they didn't want to memorize every technical detail. So my book attempts to be a roadmap so that they can truly have unbiased pointers on what do other successful investors do so they can find a trusted advisor. Most people don't want to be do-it-yourselfers. It's like going into Home Depot if you're not a do-it-yourselfer. What aisle do I go to? What size screen do I need? You know, how on earth would I do that? I wouldn't.
Well, it's analogous in a way to the running a great British house. In other words, you don't want to be the gardener. You don't want to be the landscape people, the cooks, the architects, the person that is in charge of the hunt or the gillies that help fish for salmon. All those people have to, through one advisor, say a general head, have to be coordinated, and nobody wants to do it all.
And to build on that analogy, it would be in the wealth management space as if the ultra-wealthy investor said to an architect, go build me a perfect house for me.
Right.
I want the best house, but then goes away on a 3-month vacation. How on earth would the architect know what to build?
Right, right.
So that's why in my book, the basic premise is that a partnership is needed. But unfortunately, the last 30, 40 years, it's been anything but a partnership for too many investors and their advisors, and it's not a balanced partnership.
Why do you think that it has come to that state in the financial services world, which I think is a clear pattern?
The successful families figured it out, but I'll dwell a little bit on the unsuccessful situations. The advisors were scared of their prospective clients and didn't really relate in an authentic way, and more importantly, the investors didn't do their homework, so that they became victimized or susceptible to swindle and cheating. Look at Bernie Madoff. I mean, that situation, I'll rely on my good friends who all think he's great, or I'll rely on my charity who's investing with him. I don't need to do any due diligence. Well, we know the end of that story.
Yeah, so there's a fine line between management and micromanagement and liberating delegation.
Right, and no book out there.
And that goes to what some of the premises. So what are some of the learnings or primary points it's written for the wealthy investor?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Probably the first and most important point is to sort of paraphrase Emerson, is to know thyself. Or maybe that's Shakespeare.
Could be both.
But to be self-aware.
Yes.
You know, do you want to be a do-it-yourselfer, or do you prefer an advisor?
Level of involvement.
Right. So you need to know yourself, and there are formats and exercises in the book that allow the investor to figure that out.
Yeah, so they can almost define their own predilection for how little or how much.
Exactly. So being self-aware, and then really knowing what your ideal outcome is. Setting benchmarks, knowing.
Increase revenue goals.
It could be something like, I want the purpose of your wealth. What's the purpose of my wealth? Is it to be able to give $30 million at my death? Is it to be able to support my family's lifestyle the way I want to? Is it to make a difference in the world in some other way? So there are exercises around finding out the purpose of your wealth, finding out what kind of investor you are, and then, most importantly, it's a way to make that beauty contest when you're interviewing a lot of different people a level playing field so that I call it, it's a beauty contest between an apple, a banana, and a pear. How do you do that?
Right.
Because your preference might not be mine.
Exactly.
And yet we allow the beauty contest to operate that way, and it doesn't work.
Mm-hmm. There's an analogy in brand positioning, which says that before you go to the agency that's going to represent you and promote your brand, one has to know one's own strategic vision and positioning, rather than have the advisor do that for you. So the beauty of this to me is that it's a self-help to the point where you go to an advisor who might be inclined to tell you that and charge you for it, maybe, or maybe not tell you who you really are. So knowing oneself, that enables you to find leverage in the selection of the people who are your advisors or the team that is your advisory team.
You got it exactly right. In other words, that pre-work before you're sitting in the conference room at XYZ firm is going to stand you in very good stead and allow you to have an authentic give and take. And a partnership is like standing on either end of a seesaw.
Yeah.
You can't make sudden movements.
Yeah.
You've got to be sensitive to what the other side is doing. And
I think one of the reasons that you saw it early on, and that the concept of intimate family office advisories has blossomed so much, is because the big institutions through the old boy network took it for granted, and people like yourselves as the innovators broke away, provided a more intimate approach, a deeper dive, a more relationship-driven environment, and hence your success in the book.
wow, thank you.
What's your personal definition of luxury?
Well, my definition may not be the standard. It may be a little bit off
That's why I'm asking.
charts.
Personal definition.
Is I believe, and I practiced this when I was CEO of the Institute for Private Investors, I had to cherish each and every member and value them as an individual.
Yeah.
And instead of people on my staff picking up the phone and hearing an investor and saying, oh no, what am I going to have to solve, fix, or do? Mm-hmm. It was, oh goody, a chance to connect.
Right.
I'm a big believer in people's basic yearning to connect and to hear each other, be with each other, love each other even.
I think we share that ethic of community and business relationship. Mm-hmm. Everybody's not going to be our best personal friend, but you and I know that in our business we are friends to a wide range of people, and I think that's been certainly responsible for the growth of your business. What do you do to recharge your batteries, find your center when you're not doing your book and soon to be promoting your book?
Yeah, that's right. Well, when I sold the business, I was very excited because, as I said, I realized maybe that was enough. Time for the next generation to pick it up and take it even further, as you've done.
Yes.
With the Luxury Marketing Council. So I funded a very modest foundation called Principal Quest Foundation, which is a private foundation whose sole mission is to empower women. And so we give grants to girls in high school, girls in college, and I have retreats twice a year for 10 women that I facilitate that deeper dive for a woman.
10 women, leaders women, or women who are in
all ages, all ethnic backgrounds, all socioeconomic backgrounds.
So young and more mature, seasoned, entering the market?
Oldest 70, youngest 21.
10, only 10.
Only 10, and I'm there too, and I'm only the facilitator. Right. And when I say it recharges my battery, it also drains my battery.
Right, yeah, those things
because after a weekend, and I do it just twice a year for 10 each, so now 42 women have gone through this. Some of them were women I mentored at Hunter or at Westover School, both of which were institutions I attended. And some of them are women from the industry, but usually they don't know each other.
Right.
And it's very exciting. The grants are modest.
Yeah.
They're to organizations that are empowering either high school girls or teaching financial education. That's what charges my battery.
That is fabulous. Every time I see you, my battery gets charged. I am really excited about working with you to promote your book to the council, starting in New York. Yeah. This being the first step in that direction, and then take it on the road. And I just wish you wonderful success with it. You deserve it. You've made it happen. And I value our relationship, and obviously will continue to do so. So Charlotte, thank you for today.
Yeah.
Really appreciate
You're
it.
very welcome. Thank you.
And thank you all for joining us. I'm sure you found it as much of a treat as I did listening to Charlotte talk about her career and her plans and her book, Wealth Management Unwrapped. Thank you for the investment of your time in the luxury of your company.